Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to Rock and Roll Religion. We're back after a couple of weeks. Everything seems to be working okay, so we're back to the schedule. So today we are talking about an absolute rock classic here. If it'll load. So you're gonna have to bear with me, guys. The internet's kind of new here. We are talking about The Wall by Pink Floyd, the second best-selling album of all time behind Michael Jackson's Thriller, and I believe they swap occasionally. So depending on when you're listening to this, might be the most sold out record of all time. And it's just a legendary album and movie too. And we're going to get into both of those. But here to help me do that, as usual, is 70s Rock Fan. How's it going, man?
It's going very well, my friend. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. I'm
Settling
excited to be
in?
talking about this one. I've had this one in my back pocket for a minute.
Yeah, which is
Just trying to
difficult
fit it
for a vinyl album. It's difficult to keep it in your back pocket.
in. Well, I mean, when you're my size, you can get a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, I thought, funnily enough, I thought we were here to talk about a different group. I've got this confused, and if you could just, if you were to share my screen, I thought we were here to talk about the Punk Floyd. I'm somewhat confused, but never mind.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to them eventually too. And returning to the channel is everyone's favorite heretic, Imperatus. How's it going, man?
Heretic is indeed true favorite, I wonder sometimes.
Well, you're this channel's favorite heretic.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. But yeah, good
He's
album.
a witch. He's a witch.
Probably one of the first Pink Floyd albums I had ever heard.
Yeah, I mean,
You
this
young
is
people.
the first or second.
Youngsters. You're all youngsters. This is practically one of the last albums.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, this is true, but some of us
I
are, even though we're still like me,
Some of
still
you-
middle aged, we're still young in comparison to some.
I know.
and like,
I know.
and we're. I mean, I'm of the age where most people my age don't pretty much only know Another Brick in the Wall because they've heard it a million times on rock radio. And there's just so much other great stuff on this album.
Oh, that's like the rock
God.
radio by me. The Wall stuff never really got played. It was all Dark Side of the Moon shit.
Yep.
It was always Money and Time.
Well, Money is played to death, yeah.
So is
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah, although I have to admit that anyone that can record a song in 7/8 time, like Money is insane.
Yeah, musically that's interesting.
Like, try playing the bass on that in 7/8 time is phenomenally difficult.
Which is
Like,
why
there's
no
something
one
missing in here, and I don't quite know where it is. There's something you have to leave out, but I don't know where it is.
And it's not there's a reason it's a time signature no one uses.
That's right.
Yeah.
Especially for your percussion section and rhythm. It's just annoying.
It's smug bastards, I would say. But
How to piss off your drummer in real time.
that's right.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
And
the wall is I mean, it's a thing. Even if Pink Floyd had never had any other albums, this album would have been a thing in its own right. It's got a life of its own.
Yeah.
It's a concept album, but it's also a collection of great songs. It's got a story. It's got metaphors. It's got philosophy. It's got violence.
oh yeah.
It's everything in there. It's the insane imagination of Roger Waters, particularly. But,
Yeah, it's basically if someone wrote a rock opera on LSD, which is probably exactly
Good way
what
of putting
happened knowing Floyd.
yeah, and it's got such a variety of music on it. And there's beautiful acoustic stuff. There's a heavy rock tracks. There's the extended sort of psychedelic jamming. There's music hall, musical stuff. It's
Yep.
an incredible array of songs and styles, but all tied together extremely well.
I also think too, if this wasn't a double CD, it wouldn't have worked as well.
No.
Like it needed every track on here, not only to tell the story, but tell the story as in what the story is and have it come across as a musical story.
Yeah, and like some of the transition pieces especially are needed. Songs
Yeah.
like The Thin Ice or Mother are needed in order to make it flow well. Because otherwise it would just be very jarring.
It would. I mean, if you imagine if they'd done a cut down single disc version called "The Best of the Wall," it wouldn't be quite the
It would be
same.
like most people would look at it and just go, "What the hell is this?"
That's right. That to make, I mean, I was talking on Twitter with Problem Being. I don't know if you know Problem Being on Twitter. He's a guy that streams. I've streamed with a few times. But anyway, he was. We were talking about just when you compare this to today's artists. Well, let me just say Lizzo, for instance. I just pulled that name out of the hat. Or any, it's all
Gotta be a
songs
big
about
hat.
hoes and biatches and N-words and even the rock bands are all raging for the machine and just talking about inane shit. Here's an double about totalitarianism, mental illness,
Yeah.
psychotic, whatever, mental
Psychotic breakdowns.
psychotic breakdowns, all by a rock group. Yeah.
And then not to be outdone by that, they then made a movie out of it
And then they made
with
a
no
movie.
dialogue.
Yeah, which actually was better, I think.
Yeah, no, if they had tried to do dialogue in that movie, it just wouldn't have worked. I don't think, because it was kind of just giving you a window into Roger Waters' childhood, essentially, and his kind of journey down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and he was born and brought up as a kid in an era where the Second World War was still fresh, and
Well, his father was killed
Yeah.
at Anzio, I believe.
that's right. So lots of scarring there going on. So and he's always kind of, I mean, to me, in some respects, he's sometimes overdoes the intellectual, academic philosophizing, which is where the others pull him back, like Gilmour, who's much more, let's make a great song, you know?
And I gotta give it to David Gilmour on this album. Like, some of his guitar work on this is just, it belongs in the Hall of Fame for a reason. It's
not
just fantastic.
Yeah, not just obviously the rightly acclaimed Comfortably Numb soloing, but if you listen to like Young Lust or some of the
Mother
heavier
in a lot of
songs,
ways.
like In the Flesh, Run Like Hell, the guitar playing is just phenomenal.
And it's just pure emotion too. You can really hear all the things that they were feeling going through into that song out of David Gilmour, and that's just, it's perfect. And he doesn't overdo it either. Like, those solos are exactly where they need to be.
Well, that's the thing about him. He's not a speed freak. He's not an overly flashy guy. He's all about emotion and texture and feeling, and he's the master of that. He can suspend a solo for ages. He doesn't have to just thrash. He doesn't spank the plank. He doesn't thrash it. It's all about the feeling and the sound. And he's got
it
that
is.
beautiful
And
sustain.
especially just using a standard Fender Stratocaster and just going for it. Like, and the tone he's using is just perfect.
Oh, that beautiful bottom end that he gets with the dun, 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 dun kind of thing. It's just the echo he's got. He's got a beautiful amount of echo on it.
Yeah, he's just got just enough reverb to make it sound great live.
Yeah, and the atmosphere, I think, is the word I'm looking for. Just creates an atmosphere.
And let's say hi to the chat real quick, because we got Pinochet's helicopter tours. How's it going, man? Haven't seen you in a while. And obviously Papa Cotton. We're on the 7th now. Wow, you're outstripping me in terms of what I have to be on certain platforms.
The king is dead. Long live the king.
Yep.
He's just killed the previous Papa Cotton 6.
You got Fizz Chozo here. Good to see you as always. And Sporking News Podcast. Been a while, Scott. Good to see you as ever. He was actually one of the first guys I ever met in the fellowship in person. Really solid guy. And if
he's still talking to you.
Is he?
He's still talking to you.
Yeah,
no,
well,
you met him and he's still talking to you.
Well, hey, no accounting for taste.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
But solid channel, and you guys should absolutely go check him out, because he's a great dude.
Mm-hmm.
He is indeed, yes.
If you haven't seen Sporking Dump, you should.
Haven't seen you around before, but welcome to the show. Anti-Catholic, I never really got. I mean, I can see parts of it. Yeah,
I wouldn't disagree with that, and I think Roger Waters has been religion, the number of what you would call establishment institutions. Although he does tend to rage for the machine like them all these days, but he has had because he had that upbringing, grammar school boy, church involvement, blah blah blah. That's what he was railing against, and the hypocrisy of the religious institutions, of the education system. So yeah, I would say there is a degree of that in there, Pat. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I disagree with that. Like, there is a lot of, especially just anti-authoritarianism in this album in general. And the church was certainly one of the bigger authorities in Britain at the time, especially.
It's ironic because he was brought up with the privilege of being part of those institutions and the benefiting from the grammar school, university route, and these were all. He was a fairly comfortable chap in his youth, comfortably well off. So, I guess that's what you rail against, what you know, what you're brought up in.
Now, is it Gilmore or Waters that's the putz that keeps talking about Palestine?
I'm pretty sure that's Roger Waters.
Yeah.
Gilmore's pretty quiet.
He's said a few things in the past, but Gilmore tends to keep a lid on it. Waters is extremely outspoken, and he does tend to veer a little bit. I mean, he did have severe TDS and so on, but at the same time, he's also spoken out about things like, criticizing Israel. Let's put it that way. He's spoken about Ukraine and criticizing the rush to war there and so on. And so I guess he's trying to maintain some kind of anti-war cred, not taking sides politically on that.
Which I always thought that was funny. And after in the post-Vietnam era, it was cool to be anti-war and stuff like that, basically. And everybody jumped on that bandwagon, even though most of that stuff was literally just leftist propaganda paid for by the KGB, actually.
Yeah, so he's a little bit all over the map with some things. But, I mean, he is pretty much on what you would call the old left side, British academic, university style
the liberal
Bolshevism.
left.
Yeah, it's an old-fashioned Bolshevik.
Like the liberal left.
Yeah,
which, I can live with those guys. Those guys are fine.
And I think Dave Gilmour got a lot of flack because of what his son did, which got a lot of, in the bunch of protests that happened back in the, whatever it was, 2016 or onwards. His son was caught on camera urinating against the war memorial in London, and Gilmour was mortified.
I would be
mortified.
too.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, I don't care how much you disagree with what that statue was there for or memorial is there for. That's no.
Yeah, it was basically a bunch of rich, privileged, university coddled, upper class kids getting drunk and protesting, and they desecrated the big war memorial in the centre of London, and Gilmour was not happy.
Sporty, I seemed quiet. Well, you were fucking wrong, huh?
Anyway, a lot of that is in here, but yeah, the politics is pretty much all Roger Waters. I mean, Gilmour was certainly heavily involved in the music, but didn't write that many tracks, and you've got to really say it's a Roger Waters album.
Well, you can say that about a lot of Floyd, a lot of later Floyd too, where Roger Waters was really the dominating force in the band.
From Animals onwards, I think. Before that, Gilmour held his own in terms of writing, and I know when they've had their fallouts, Waters has complained that Gilmour isn't that great a writer, which is why it took an awful lot of people to write the songs when Waters was thrown out of the band.
And it kind of does show in their later output that, it's not necessarily their best stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple of good tracks on the for the Turning Away and stuff like that. It's okay, the Pulse era stuff, but it doesn't quite have the same. It's the same with a lot of classic bands. You can take bits out of them, and it never is quite the same. It's like solo Beatles is never quite the same as all four of them together.
It's even like that in
True.
the
Although
underground metal scene.
I will say George Harrison's solo stuff I actually like a lot better than the Beatles.
Oh, I love a lot of George Harrison solo stuff. I was a big fan. But sorry, Imperatus, you were.
It's the same thing with the metal scene. You take one or two people out of the band, and it's like, even if the album's decent, there's something that's just missing.
Yeah, I mean, like, look at Judas Priest, for example. I mean, yeah, Tim Owens did a great job as their singer, but Jugulator and Demolition are no Screaming Preventions or Painkiller.
Look at Maiden with Blaze. Oh, never mind. We ignore that.
There's something about the
that era
chemistry.
never happened, even though I did an episode on it.
Yeah, there's a certain chemistry in bands that works, even if they end up hating each other's guts or whatever.
Well,
or in conflict,
the thing with the stuff that I listened to is a lot of them were a bunch of guys that all knew each other growing up. Emperor, for example, they're from a tiny town in Norway. They're from Telemark.
Well, the heroes of Telemark.
So probably
good movie.
You know, Isan, the singer, has said there's nothing in that town to do. That's why they all love metal music. They all love music, and there was nothing to do. So, hey, let's start a band. And hell of a band that they did, too. But that's a whole nother...
We'll get to them eventually.
It's interesting that certain towns just seem to spawn certain stuff around the world. There's the weirdest of towns. Like Akron, Ohio had like Chrissy Hind and REM and a bunch of bands, and it's just nobody would know the place or ever heard of it, but it's just like this hot with Liverpool. That's what happened in Liverpool, of course. I mean, but yeah, Telemark is an interesting one because of the Second World War connections.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it also seems like a lot of the black metal, honestly, some of it came out of Oslo. Most of it came out of Bergen.
Yeah.
I can see that. Bergen's way up there.
It's a coastal town. That's also where my family's from.
Yeah.
The colder, the darker, more depressing.
Yeah.
True. If you grew up in Hawaii, I'm guessing black metal's not big on your list.
Not as much, yeah. The black
you
metal
don't have that much to be angry about.
That's right. Acapulco doesn't have a big black metal scene, that kind of thing.
Oh, I have heard a couple of Mexican metal bands that kick ass.
Oh, they do, yeah. But I mean, that's more like the exception than the rule in a sense.
True, yeah.
So yeah, it's environment. It's nurture over nature. The Floyd are a great example of that chemistry because you had the intellectual pseudo intellectual, some people may say, Roger Waters, with all these ideas, but musically speaking, Gilmour was more of a musician. Now, Roger Waters fans will hate me for saying that. Gilmour himself criticised Roger Waters. Now, I know they were at each other's throats. Criticised Roger Waters' musical skills. He said I had to teach him how to play things on the bass all the time. I think he was over exaggerating. All these things are because of person, but I think as a generalisation, Waters was the ideas man. Gilmour had slightly more of the musical technicality. So, but you need both.
Yeah, you do. You need just because someone's a brilliant musician doesn't mean they know how to write lyrics or really have a good idea of what the album should be. And it really does take both sides of that vision to make it happen.
Yeah, as Pinochet's Helicopter Tours rightly said, Gilmour played on some interesting stuff outside of Floyd that he's played with Clapton. He played the guitar on Give My Regards to Broad Street, the McCartney movie, and not a very good movie, and album, but the guitar solo at the end of No More Lonely Nights, I didn't know for years, till years later, that was Dave Gilmour playing this big long solo in the outro. And then, of course, he played with McCartney on the Run Devil Run album and the live gigs that supported that. Absolutely kick-ass rock and roll, where you saw a different Dave Gilmour guitar style. He's playing old-fashioned rock and roll, heavy guitar licks and riffs. None of this elegant, twangy, whatever. He was really rocking it up, and he showed how good he was at that.
That's what he kind of became famous for. Is that big, that like very slow kind of emotional blues riff that you'd see out of like this album or Dark Side of the Moon.
But if you ever watch the McCartney gig at the Cavern promoting Run Devil Run, when Gilmour's playing lead guitar and it, he absolutely rips the joint up.
Excellent. I'll have to give
My
that a
God,
shot.
rock and
'Cause
roll.
I hadn't really heard of that before.
Oh, it's my favorite Paul McCartney solo album, Run Devil Run. It's all rock and
Okay.
roll covers, and it's heavy as hell. In fact, Ian Pace is the drummer on it, and on
Okay.
that one. It just absolutely rocks, and it's very obscure. I mean, it wasn't a big hit album. It's about year 2000 or so, 1999.
Okay. And I'm not surprised that he played with Clapton. I mean, Clapton's had a ton of very, very talented guitar players that have worked with him in the past. Like, one of the, like that crying end solo for Layla is all Greg Allman.
Oh, well, that's right. Dwayne Allman. So it was
Dwayne Allman, that's right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I always get the two of them mixed up.
Dwayne Allman played a lot of session work in that era. There's a great version of Hey Jude, Wilson Pickett, I think. Am I getting mixed up? Hey Jude cover, which Dwayne Allman plays the lead on, and it's just fucking killer,
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean,
again, you wouldn't know because it's long pre-internet days. I mean, it's
yeah, unless
I
you own
just
the
sat
album
there
and
and
looked
read
at
the
the
liner
jacket.
notes.
yeah. Sometimes these things were done anonymously, but it's Wilson
Yeah, true.
Pickett's
Sometimes they
cover of
wouldn't
Hey
even want
Jude.
their name on it.
Yeah, so it's worth seeking that stuff out. But I'm just looking for the Run Devil Run happens to be not only a Paul McCartney album, but some kind of all-female group of girls' generation. Run Devil Run. I've never heard of them. They look good though. Yes.
We're just
Never
gonna
mind the
save that
quality,
one
feel the
for later?
width. Never mind the quality, feel the width. So hang on, open image and new tab. I don't want to just to sidetrack us, but this, if you ever see this, this is the album cover you need to look for.
Interesting.
If you're going to listen to this Paul McCartney, this is Paul McCartney's Run Devil Run, and it just rocks. Absolutely. It's obscure rock and roll covers, a couple of well-known ones, but most of them are pretty obscure, and a couple of originals. And you'll hear Dave Gilmour all over it. So.
Nice.
Yeah,
And Pinochet's helicopter tour is absolutely right. I mean, there have been so many famous musicians that have started out as guitar techs.
Yeah, Snowy White. He spent some time in Thin Lizzy as well, of course. Snowy White.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to just talk famous guitar techs, I mean, Lemmy Kilmister was Jimi Hendrix's roadie.
That's right. Well, look at ZZ Top now. When Dusty Hill died, his bass tech is now in the band,
Well, that's usually how it works.
appearing as Dusty Hill. Almost, he looks the same.
Yeah.
But
Yes, Morgan, I love doing these conversations. And you're welcome on anytime you have time, man. I'll talk to you after the show, and we'll see what we want to do with that, because I would love to talk to you about some music, man. I know it's something we don't get a chance to talk about enough.
So I'd like to. Sorry, mate. Go ahead. It's your show.
No, there's getting a Papa Cotton's thing here where that tracks.
Well, imagine being on acid in a theater, especially if it was a huge screen, watching the.
Well, yeah, especially talking, 1982. That meld between live action and animation was just absolutely mind blowing for the time.
Yeah, well, Gerald Scarfe did all those great animations and illustrations. He was a very unique animator and artist. Did a lot of cartoons in Britain, but the imagery with the marching hammers. Yeah, it really did capture what was in his mind. What was in Roger Waters' mind. God, you wouldn't want to be in there for too long, would you?
It seems like a very scary place.
Yeah.
Doing a bunch of acid in the 60s and 70s will lead to some foulness.
Oh, indeed. Yeah. Well, at least these guys survived it. Sid Barrett went doolally and never recovered. But,
unfortunately.
Some people just shouldn't have touched it, but there you go. Peter Green of Fleetwood Mac, the same thing, just ruined them. But yeah, so Pope and Imperatus, I'm going to take over for a second. I want to ask you guys, Pope, what's your first memories of the album The Wall and hearing it, and what did at the time, what did you think? And
the first time I heard this was probably in high school, like the whole album. And I remember just just sitting there and we listened to it like one Friday afternoon. Like we'd all go pick out a metal album at the local record store and then go listen to it. And then I remember we were all just listening to it. It was like, holy crap, how have we never heard this before? Like this is like we've heard parts of it, but like this is the whole thing. And it's like I think it's one of those things too that one of the like it's very much greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
In that, like, there's memorable tracks in here. Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, Mother, Comfortably Numb, Run Like Hell, all that. Goodbye Blue Sky is one of my favorites.
Oh, it's a beautiful track. Beautiful, yeah.
And it was really great because, like, we were young kids. We didn't know anything yet.
And what, you high school age, was it? Yeah.
The first time I really ever sat down and listened to it, yeah. And then I've obviously seen the movie a bunch of times, listened to the album a ton of times since. And I absolutely adored it. And it kind of made me a lot more of a Pink Floyd fan.
Yeah, had you really heard much of them before?
I mean, I'd heard it on the radio, but it was like, very much like the classic rock stuff. I was just like, oh, that's the stuff my dad listens to.
Yeah,
stuff like that. But so I heard it, but I never really paid attention.
Yeah, I mean, as I think Empiritus might have said earlier, or you might have said, it's always, you'd hear money all the time. Time and money, time. You wouldn't hear One of These Days or Interstellar Overdrive or something like that. And I love One of These Days, especially in the later live versions when they work the Doctor Who theme into it, which is kind of neat. But so Empiritus, were you what do you remember about hearing this album, or when it came
I
out?
heard it through a buddy of mine in high school that he tried educating me in music that wasn't metal.
And he did a forced education.
No. Just it's the general rule of it's my car. I'm listening to what I want.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who he got me into Pink Floyd. He got me into Rush. And in return, I got him into a few bands. Like, because of me, he really enjoys Testament and Maiden and stuff like that. The only band that he failed to get me into was the Grateful Dead. I just wasn't having that shit at all.
I've never been a fan.
I like one song, and it's the one song that's on the goddamn radio.
Yeah,
Touch of Grey.
Touch of Grey.
Yeah, Touch of Grey is like the only song I really dig from them.
But, and then over the years, hanging out with some people that are a bit more into the progressive side of things, I got turned on to, listening to like metal and Animals. Like, they kind of skipped every once in a while. They throw Dark Side on, but not often. It was more of like the pre-Dark Side stuff, like I said, Animals and metal. So I kind of came into Pink Floyd in some odd way, I guess you could say. Because even my buddy, the first album he had me listen to was The Wall. But then after that, it jumped up to like Wish You Were Here, and then Animals, and then...
It's interesting to work back from The Wall, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I started. It was like we started with like The Wall and, started with Dark Side of the Moon, and then kind of like on my own, I just kind of listened to the older stuff and got a bigger appreciation for the band as a whole.
Yeah, I did obviously, given my advanced age and senility, I had a different experience in that they were playing, as I say, they were playing Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett Pink Floyd songs on the radio when I was a kid, and they were on Top of the Pops, the British pop music show every Thursday night chart show, because they had a couple of hits in the late 60s with Syd Barrett, See Emily Play and Arnold Lane, and stuff like that. And so they were a huge fixture of the British psychedelic scene in the UFO Club in London. So they'd gained some notoriety and they had a little bit of commercial success. So I'd heard that stuff, but I didn't think, I was just a kid. I didn't really think anything of it other than these are a couple of pop songs. And then I kind of skipped the metal and echoes stuff because I was more, as a kid, more into things like Status Quo and Slade and all these guitar-based rock pop rock bands, and then of course my older brother and sister had Dark Side of the Moon, so that was played all the time. So it was just kind of in the background for me. That I don't think I really, they were just always there, And it wasn't until I bought copies of those albums like that and I Wish You Were Here on My Own that I started to really listen to them and realised how much depth there was in that. So by the time The Wall came out, I was like, oh, this is a big deal, you know? And I had the opportunity to go see them in Earl's Court when they did the first set of shows with The Wall, with the building The Wall on stage and all that. I kind of chickened out because I didn't have the money, and it was 4 hour drive there to London and a 4 hour drive back. And some guys went, and I chickened out. I didn't have the cash, and I bitterly regret that now. So that's one of the regrets I've got. Like, why didn't I just go to hell with it? You know.
Yeah.
But hey, it was £5 for a ticket. That was a lot of money when you were only earning £20 a week or whatever, So, but yeah, there's just one of these bands that kind of have always been there, and it took getting not just, and you hear those songs on the radio we mentioned, and it wasn't until I really started buying the albums myself and listening to them, I thought, there's much more here, and then worked backwards to the post-Sid Barrett but pre-Dark Side of the Moon stuff that we mentioned, so. Which I love. I love the extended jams on those. Like one of these days, the Pompeii version is just killer.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the cool thing with live albums is you can do a lot of stuff that wouldn't necessarily make it on the record because of time or whatever, and you can do that live.
Yeah, and Pinochet's mentioned a couple of the movies. They did some movie stuff. So the movie More. That's a weird little movie, but the music's pretty good. And let's make.
And that was a thing in the 70s and early 80s of rock bands doing soundtracks for movies. Like I know Toto did the soundtrack for Dune.
Yeah.
And it's actually a great soundtrack. I really like it. I like it a lot more than most other things Toto's done.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to give them credit for putting the word Kilimanjaro in a song, but that's...
True.
Yeah, total. I don't know. One or two good songs, but...
and this was also the era when this came out, and this is 1979, the album, and then 82, the movie, of, a lot of rock bands doing these big rock operas and, really progressive, especially prog bands. Bands like Rush, these guys, The Who. Although The Who did this a little earlier with Tommy.
Well, Tommy was... There were one or two other attempts before The Who by a couple of bands to make what they would have called concept albums. Pretty Things did one, which they weren't that successful, but The Who really were Tommy will be regarded as the first real attempt at a proper concept album stroke rock opera, whatever you want to call it. I think they weren't the first, but it was the first one that really made it and nailed it,
Yeah.
And again, like The Wall, there are songs on The Wall that I don't particularly enjoy, and the same with Tommy. But overall, the overall package is strong.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff on the Wall that it's really just a transition piece, and you wouldn't really listen to it as on its own. But as part of the whole, it works. Like Bring the Boys Back Home or something like that.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of the other film scores. So there's more Zabriskie Point. That's the other one. The film Zabriskie Point. They did,
and then, of course, at the end of that era, you had the immortal Highlander with the soundtrack done by Queen.
Oh, that's just great, though. Well, and of course they had done the Flash Gordon sound. I wish I'd worn my John Deacon T-shirt today. Then, but they did, of course, the Flash Gordon soundtrack before, which was not a typical Queen album. I mean, there's a couple of hard rock songs in there. Most of it's the electronic stuff, but I think they were kind of made. They were made for movies. Queen were made for movies. I think if you think about their songs. Yeah.
Well, in a lot of ways, like they were, especially early on, like borderline power metal, and they kind of showed it with Highlander. And the soundtrack, which I believe is it's a kind of magic.
Yeah. A Kind of Magic was the album that came out that had most of those songs on it, as separate from the official soundtrack album. That Queen's official release was A Kind of Magic and had most of the songs. There's still a couple of songs from that have never made it onto any record, like their version of New York, New York, which is in the getting played in the car, one of the car scenes.
Oh, really? That was them.
Yeah, it's not in. I don't think you can get it on an official release anywhere. So stuff like that. But just a bit of trivia for you: that Pink Floyd did the music for the Zabriskie Point movie. Harrison Ford made an
Well,
early
let's not forget, as Sporky
made an
brings up too, Queen
uncredited
did
appearance.
Flash Gordon.
Yep.
Well, that's what I said. Yeah, they did Flash. Flash.
I didn't
Gordon.
hear you say that. That's on me. Then.
That's because you're
Ooh.
just you switch off every time I speak.
Hey! I'm not comics. I don't lead stream and switch anything off.
Well, Sporking, if you want, I'm a Beatles fanatic with a huge collection of Beatles stuff. So if you want anyone to come on and talk about the Beatles, I humbly suggest myself.
No, I'm not the world's biggest Beatles fan, but I do like some of their stuff, especially their early material.
Yeah, I
Or they
might
got
hop
off
on for
into
that. Would like to be on one of your channel one of these days and shoot the shit with you. You know, if you're
I think the thing about the Beatles, I mean, I know a lot of people hate them. A lot of people think they're overvalued. I don't think they're overvalued because I think their contribution is not so much as musicians, but as songwriters and explorers of recording advancement, along with George Martin. You know, each album was a step forward and many times groundbreaking for the entire field of rock music. I don't think rock music per se today as we know it would have existed without the Beatles.
No, absolutely. Like, they're not my favorite band, but they're a very important band in terms
Yeah,
of
exactly.
setting up what came later.
Yeah, I can understand people not liking the music because, I mean, let's face it, it's 60 years old.
it's also bubblegum pop for the most part.
Some of it, yeah.
It started that way. But as I
Yeah,
say,
true.
they developed that. They were being, if the record companies had had their way, they would have continued to be bubblegum pop.
Right.
But guys like the Beatles and certain other bands started to say, well, we want to do more than that. We've got these ideas. We don't want to just come in and do the album in 12 hours and, you know, here's 2 singles in an album, then twice a year. We've got something else we want to do, and we've got these ideas. And they really forced that
Well, the funny
pace.
thing is, part of my music education that was non-metallic came from some of the people that I was in the Viking reenactment group with. Because the guy who ran the group was probably your age, 70s, if not a little older.
So 25?
And, you know, he educated his kids into pretty much what he listened to as far as music went.
Yeah.
So I heard a lot of like the White Album and Helter Skelter and the Who and various Floyd albums. And surprisingly, though, there was some stuff that he didn't care for. It's like, that's just sad. Like he was not a Sabbath guy or a Zeppelin guy at all.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, especially more so on the Sabbath, but
that's unfortunate. Yeah. However, each to their own, and I think Pat is, as he says, the best band ever is also the most overrated band of all time, the Beatles. So yeah. I mean, I don't expect devoted worship of them, but I do like. I always say, well, at least acknowledge their importance in the history of rock music, much of which wouldn't have existed in the way we know it without them. And that's not hyperbole. I've got a book by Mark Lewison called The Complete Beatles Recordings, and it's like reading a novel. It's every day they spent in the studio, what they recorded, how they did it, and you think, oh God, that sounds really dull, but it isn't, because you turn the page and it said, today they said, we're not going to do this, we're going to try and overdub these tracks, and even though they didn't have the technology, and we're going to try to do this, we're going to try to do that. And it just expands every day into yet another achievement that we now take for granted. You know,
Yeah, and you know, I got to admire their work ethic too. I mean, they had 21 albums in 7 years.
Yeah, something, you know, just
Absolutely
incredible
insane.
work ethic. And then they said, you know what, we're not going to put any singles on the albums. So they did several albums and singles that were not, the singles weren't on the albums. You know, so they went, let's make those two things different, you know. And then it's little things like they had the first Moog on a rock album, you know, when George Harrison brought his Moog in on Abbey Road, you know, that kind of thing. They were just always trying something different, and they had the right producer, who never happened without George Martin.
And I
other
think that
producers.
leads back into bands like Pink Floyd of being able to kind of experiment with that more psychedelic sound early on, and then going into the more prog rock scene in the 70s. Like
Yeah.
they kind of showed that that kind of experimentation was popular, or not just possible, but would sell.
Yeah. Well, this is another example, as you say. The Beatles gained, because of the commercial pop hits, they gained the power to be able to say to the record company, no, we're going to do this the way we want to do it. Same with Pink Floyd. Because Dark Side of the Moon was so huge, it freed them up to have the power to say to the record company, well, we're going to spend 6 weeks in the studio doing this next one, or 6 months, or whatever. We're going to use this, or we're going to record it this way. We want this producer. They weren't just, okay, you got 2 weeks, you're going to have this guy. The record companies had that power still. And you had to have this huge level of commercial success to say to them, no, fuck you, we're going to do it the way we want to do it, which you
And
would never have
the
got.
weird part for them was Dark Side of the Moon was a huge commercial success by the standards of that time, and enabled them, like you say, to do The Wall, because I don't think that would have happened without it. Like if they were still working on the levels of popularity they had with Animals and Metal, like don't get me wrong, they're both great albums, but neither one of them was very commercially
Animals was one of
successful.
the least commercial of the latter day ones, because it didn't have any, first of all, it didn't have any hits on it, or certainly nothing that
Is it
rock.
any surprising that that's one of my favorite albums?
Well, there you go. That's the one you least hear on the radio of their
Yes,
post Dark
true.
Side albums. Yeah. But yeah, they gained, to do an album like The Wall, which probably cost a lot of money to make for the time, a lot of months in the studio, maybe even as much as a year, I don't know. Orchestras, other additional musicians coming in, overdub after overdub, remakes, re-record. They must have re-recorded it about 3 times. You need to be able to say to the record company, "Fuck you." We've earned this.
Yeah, and then the funny part was, like, this was the experimental one, and it, like I said at the intro, is the second best-selling album of all time in any genre. The only one that beats it is Thriller by Michael Jackson, because I'm pretty sure everyone who's old enough to hold a record owns that.
It's quite an incredible achievement for what is really a progressive rock band.
Yeah.
And not a very commercial album either. Like, this is out there.
Yeah, and the one single that did get put out, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, was the perfect choice because it was 3 minutes long and had a catchy riff and a memorable chorus, and so they nailed that on that one just enough to get it out there on the radio, because you
And
wouldn't
it kind of
imagine.
caught the punk vibe too, of like that "we don't need no education" kind of like
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
funny
fist
because
in the air kind of rebellion song.
I can't remember the name of the school, but I think it was a school from Brixton. But these were kids from one of the poorest, least achieving schools in Britain that they used as that chorus. We don't need no education. So
Well,
I would just like to say to Pat S that when did I ever say I didn't think the Ramones were a fantastic band? I don't recall ever saying that. And I've seen them live, so, and it was back in the day, not in latter day different lineups. But I love the Ramones. When did I ever say I didn't? Are they
They
the
were the
most
first punk band.
important? Are they the most important? Maybe.
I'd say they're the founders of punk.
What does the most important mean?
True.
They all had influence in their own way.
But when it comes to staying power and just consistency, I think the Ramones are the foundation of punk. Like, the Sex Pistols are great, but they only lasted 8 months.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the Ramones is that they really stripped everything down to the basics of rock and roll.
Yep. In a way that Motorhead kind of did as well.
Strip it
at
down,
the same time.
Take all that other stuff off, strip it down. Bass guitar, drums, vocals, 2-minute song, catchy chorus, great riff, bang. It really is the fundamentals of rock and roll. So it stripped it right
and
back.
what they were doing musically wasn't very complicated either. It was, especially from a guitar standpoint, it was literally, here's an A chord, here's a G chord, here's an E chord, now start a band.
But it's often the hardest thing to do is to make memorable records with just that formula.
True, and they did.
There's something else there that's needed, and they had it. Whatever it was, they had it. because otherwise it would just be there's a million 3-chord bands out there, but there's
Yep.
only one Ramones, and I think the funny thing for me is that when they were interviewed about, do you guys want to be this, that, they said, no, we only ever wanted to be the Bay City Rollers. They just wanted to be a pop band. But that's all they could do is play those instruments. So,
It's like, I think I remember seeing an interview, I think it was Johnny, where he was just like, he's like, we're just 4 fuck ups from New Jersey. We didn't really
yeah,
care.
we just want to be a pop band and have hits, They were funny, they're a funny band, but I love them dearly, but
And that's the cool part about this period in the late 70s, where there was so much stuff going on musically, whether it be like, the advent of kind of the more electronic side with synths coming in, starting to being used in a lot of prog bands. The progressive guys getting progressively heavier, heavy metal basically taking the world by storm at this point with the new wave of British heavy metal.
Oh, absolutely, at its peak, or reaching its peak. Starting
And
to
then
reach its peak,
in the middle of it, you had punk coming through and new wave and all this other stuff. So it was really just an interesting time. And the cross-pollination that was going on too between genres. Because
Yeah,
these
and
guys were all hanging out.
I do remember an awful lot of confusion around the time of the Walls release, though, because Pink Floyd were one of the bands that the punks were supposedly railing against. Progressive rock, huge tours, massive stage sets, bloated, blah, 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 whatever. Rich, successful. And yet The Wall was such a different album.
It was prog, but it wasn't pretentious prog.
Yeah, they found it hard to criticize it because of some
It
of
was
the
basically
themes
if you took the punk ethos and put it in a progressive format.
Yeah, they did find it very hard to criticize. There was a lot of mixed emotions. Some people still hated it because it was, big overblown concept album, whatever. Others went, no, there's more to it than that. So it got a lot of critical argument back and forward in the British music press at the time. But I often don't really see, even though it's possibly one of the epitomes of progressive rock. It's funny, I never think of The Wall as that. I never think
Because
of it
it's
as
kind of its own thing.
Yeah, I never think of it as, well, here's not like I would think of a Yes album as although that's prog rock. I would never think of saying that about The Wall.
Or even like, Farewell to Kings or 2112 by Rush. Like, okay, that's obviously prog rock. It's great for me, but it's prog. And this is just kind of its own animal.
Yeah, it's rock that's progressive without being progressive rock.
Like I said, it's prog rock without being pretentious.
Yeah, it's not. Well, there's a lot of pretentiousness in The Wall, though.
Well, yeah, but not
own
the
way.
same level as a double LP 4-song album by Yes.
You could say it's ambitious, not pretentious, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, but yeah, there's some heavy shit on it. I mean, even right from the opening with In the Flesh. I mean, that's just a wall of heavy guitar. That's
that's an epic heavy metal intro, pretty much, of just that does long, just drawn out riffs. It's just
possibly one of the heaviest things. It's certainly the heaviest thing Pink Floyd ever did.
Yeah, and I can imagine being a Floyd fan at the time and picking up the new record, not knowing what to expect because it's brand new, and then you just hear In the Flesh come bellowing out the speakers, and you're like, what?
Yeah, I always thought of it as like a literal wall of guitar.
Well, there may have been some thought going into that on Roger Waters' part too, of just that wall of sound.
Yeah, because it just rips your ears off, and that that heaviest riff. It's almost Black Sabbath territory in places,
a little bit.
Yeah.
And like I say, there's cross-pollination going on from all these different genres. Like you have kind of the music, like that heavier musical style from like Black Sabbath or somebody like that. And then you have like kind of the more punk anti-establishment ethos coming into this. And it all kind of coagulates into The Wall. And it's one of those things that I think makes it stand the test of time and stand out as well as it does. Because this still sounds as good as it ever did right now.
Oh, it's beautifully produced by Bob Ezrin, and there's so much going on in there musically. If you listen to it closely, it's production values are it doesn't sound like it's got a plastic sheen over it, but it's clear, crystal clear.
It's rough, and it's rough on purpose.
Yeah, rough, but you can hear it all. which is great. You know, I just
And then it includes like some beautiful acoustic sections in there, like "Goodbye Blue Sky" or "Mother."
oh, Goodbye Blue Sky is gorgeous, and the beautiful vocals on it. Yeah,
And I love the duality of it too, and it really comes out on the movie, where you have that like kind of pleasant, very kind of soothing, relaxing, acoustic guitar lick, and then you have just that oppressive synth coming in on top of it.
yeah. I was just looking at some of the credits on it, and I just realised that some of the backing vocals, which on tracks like "Goodbye Blue Sky" and "Mother" are beautiful. Bruce Johnston's one of the backing vocalists, Beach Boys
Really?
of the Beach Boys. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Okay.
And Tony Tennille, who was a captain in Tennille.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of nice, really good backing vocalists on there that I didn't realise were on it. So that's why those are so good. There's some beautiful stuff there. All that ooh.
Yeah. That's it. I just figured that would just be all three of them.
Yeah. And you spoke about Toto. I just realised Jeff Porcaro plays drums on Mother.
Oh, does he?
I didn't know that until I looked up the detailed credits. I've never read that deeply into the credits. Isn't that weird?
That's insane. Like I said, like people you'd never expect were hanging out with each other and constantly playing with each other and stuff like that. It's cool.
Yeah. Another thing I didn't realise was that Michael Kamen, who's a great composer and conductor and film soundtrack guy, did the orchestral arrangement on Comfortably Numb.
That doesn't surprise me actually, because
Yeah.
that does have a very theatrical feel to it.
Because he's worked with Clapton and Gilmour and other things. So, yeah, it does that. When you think about Comfortably Numb, it has a very, and it has been used in movies, it's got a very movie feel to it.
Yeah.
Well, it was in a movie.
And I think this is
called
one of those
Blood.
albums too. Like, normally I'd ask you guys like, what's your favorite track on this record? But I don't think you can pick really.
Oh, it's tough.
Because it's just one big piece to me.
Yeah, they flow into each other. It's extremely difficult. I know there's some certain tracks I'm not particularly keen on. I'm not particularly keen on the Trial stuff. Side 4 for me is so-so. I do love In the Flesh and Run Like Hell.
Oh, yeah.
Run Like Hell is an interesting track because it actually ended up being used on, you hear it all over the world on, they play music at the beginning of news broadcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Run Like Hell was used on a lot of those. I'm
sure Floyd was thrilled about that.
Oh, yeah. Here's it's being used for fake news broadcasts. But Comfortably Numb is a triumph as a song, but I'd hesitate to say it's my favourite in the album. I do love Young Lust. I love
Young
In the
Lust is a great
Flesh.
one.
Young Lust is a great track, yeah.
I
Possibly
think
my
I'd
favourite.
have to go with Goodbye Blue Sky just for how different it is from your usual stuff on this record. And also, especially having seen the movie, that animated segment is just mind-blowing.
Yeah. Well, the movie is interesting as well because, again, back to the punk thing, they cast Bob Geldof as Pink, who was still hot as a musician in the Boomtown Rats, who were a big punk band in Britain. So there was another punk connection, that was not a casting that anybody particularly expected. And
I was surprised in that, watching the movie again recently, they did a separate version of the album for this movie. They didn't reuse the actual songs themselves. They did a retake of it,
re-recorded, yeah.
Which there had to be some money behind this then, because they completely redid the album.
I wonder why. Is that because of timing issues? Like they had to edit things to make them fit the movie, as opposed to using the original track, or whether they needed different.
Well, there's also musical
different
pieces
mixes.
There's also like musical pieces here and there that aren't on the album that are on the movie. So I think they really wanted to do a different take on it for the movie, not just make a music video for the whole thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting process. I mean, we get bands like The Who must have gone through that with Tommy, and anyone that's had an album turned into a movie. I guess you don't just take the songs and slap them on a soundtrack because a movie is a very different beast, and I guess you need
Yeah.
different mixes. Perhaps there's different sound mixes required for. At that time, it would be 35mm stereo or quadraphonic cinema
And it's
sound.
surprising to me because that would make it a lot more expensive to do because you have to go back into the studio and re-record it all,
Yeah,
rather than just take it straight off the record.
yeah, I'd be interested to know the process around that. What the decision making process was, and just how much had to be changed, whether it was start from scratch or just strip some of the tracks out and edit the timing, and then add in your pieces you felt you needed for the movie. Yeah, so Pinochet's talking about the final cut. It was meant to be part of, or certainly tracks that were written and as part of the wall. Not a huge favourite album of mine, although Not Now John is a good song on that one. Not now, John, I got to get on with this bloody film. Whatever. So it's kind of alluding to the struggles within the band at the time, the power struggles.
And I can see doing one album on it, but two does seem excessive. And Ruben's here. Hey, Ruben, good to see you,
Ruben.
man. Gonna have to have you on the show one of these days, man.
Oh, he's a good lad. He's too busy romancing the babes to spend time on
I thought you were about to say he's too busy romancing the stone.
romancing the stone, the stoned perhaps.
Good for
Yeah, the Final Cut's not one of my favourite albums. I've played it a few times.
Man, if you haven't looked into the Who, I mean, me and 70s did a stream on it a few months ago, and we're going to be doing a part 2 here.
There will be a part 2. Yeah, we only really
we only got like a third of the way through the discography in 3
I think
hours.
we barely reached like Who's Next, and even then we skipped a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
I think it was more just we were just talking about the band in general in that one, but there's much more we could dive into. And
Deep Purple's another rabbit hole, man, that we're going to go into on this channel because they were huge in the formation of metal.
Well, as you recall from the metal stream we did on my channel, the Metal Gods one, that was mainly about the big 4 originators: Purple, Sabbath, Zeppelin, and the other one,
Priest.
But you know what? You know what was funny was when I don't know who it was that replied to it, but somebody replied to Elton John on Twitter, and they said, "It's okay, I've got the gay English singer that I need," and it was Rob Halford on the motorbike. I went, I liked that. I said, "Fuck yeah."
Oh,
That's our guy. We don't need you, Elton. Fuck off.
well, it's a shame I'm not back on Twitter yet because it seems like a much more fun place in the last couple of months.
It is. Oh God, it's liberating. You can actually reply to people without getting slapped now. But yeah, the Purple were a very interesting band, and it might sound, some of it might sound a little tame now, but they were the loudest band in the world at the time. They were in a competition with the Who to see who could keep getting in the Guinness Book of Records as the loudest band.
And then about 1981, Motorhead blew them both out of the water and was there right up until Nanowar knocked him off the podium.
Talk about an arms race of sound, It's just the arms race. So Pinochet is asking about the artists. Were they anti-communist? Well, I would certainly say Rush were very libertarian. I mean,
you look at songs like The Trees and stuff like that.
And they're into, hell, the whole of 2112 is an Ayn Rand tribute almost. I don't know about the others. I think there was certainly with Sabbath, they certainly always had a strong anti-war core.
Very anti-establishment.
Yeah, I don't know if they were anti-communist, anti-whatever. It was more anti-establishment, whoever the establishment may be. The Who is another interesting one because Pete Townsend himself is a art school graduate with a lot of possibly you would call communist leanings, and yet at the same time he's been willing to absolutely rip the shit out of all sides at various times about things. So I think he's more a free thinker. It was more about free thinking for these guys.
Yeah, this was a lot more about like freedom of expression and stuff like that, which is why you're seeing them come back to our side now, is because we're the ones in the position they were in.
Yeah,
some of them.
We
D. Snyder, I'm looking at you here.
Yeah, we never moved from free thinking and libertarianism. A lot of
Yeah, like
bands
we've kind of
did.
been here the whole time.
And I think that was more. It was anti-establishment. It was anti, and that could have been any. Doesn't matter who the powers were. A lot of anti-war, anti-establishment, free thinking, freedom of artistic expression was a big thing for these bands. Rush, particularly, that was what a lot of their songs were about. It's freedom of artistic expression, the
And
ability
freedom
to
of choice too.
freedom of choice. Yeah. So I don't think they saw themselves as being political in an old party political sense. And a lot of the
Yeah, what
British
they meant by
guys that
political
were,
back then is different than what we mean now. Where
yeah,
political now basically means you're part of the partisan divide or one way or the other. Whereas back then it was we're just making a statement. We're not
yeah,
saying who's right or who's wrong. We're saying this is a thing.
yeah, and they made no attempt to attack the positions of other people in their songs. I mean, it was, yeah, they were definitely about, and a lot of these guys, like Sabbath particularly, you can tell, they're working class guys from blue collar industrial areas. So a lot of their stuff was from that perspective, the struggle of life in those hard working, hard drinking English towns where, you were in the smokestacks or in the shadow of the smokestacks. And
Which
so,
is why I think Sabbath had such an appeal early on in their career because they were talking about the stuff that the everyman could get behind because they were the everyman.
yeah. So there was a lot of
Like,
economic,
talking about the heroin epidemic and Hand of Doom and stuff like that.
yeah,
Like, this was stuff that people were seeing.
yeah. Plus the struggles of making a living as a blue collar guys. They grew up in that environment, and a lot of them also grew up with the aftermath of the Second World War. So they were that coloured a lot of their anti-war feelings. There was the depressions and rationing after that, and so all this kind of played into it. But I don't think they saw themselves as being, oh, I'm a member of the Conservative or Labour Party, and that's all I ever. Some of them were probably more pro-union or working class issues of that kind. But
Yeah, I mean, Zeno hits it right on the top on the head here, where it's like we used to be able to discuss this civilly and just talk about it rather than
no, we couldn't.
autistically shriek at
Shut
the
up.
other side.
No, we couldn't. Shut up. I'm just kidding, mate. Yeah, I mean, there was I think there was a conversation could be had then, not, not
I think that changed in
I'm
the
right,
last
shut
5
up.
or 6 years, really.
Yeah, I'm right, you shut up.
Where it's really become less of that and more you agree with me or you're a horrible person. And it's just like, that's one thing that, like, maybe it's just me, but like I've gotten on, like, most of my conservative friends are this way too, where it's just like we hold different political positions, but we don't think of ourselves as better people for that.
Yeah,
And that's a thing that the far left has really started doing that scares the shit out of me is that,
well,
like,
they've equated having their opinion with being virtuous, and they've changed the language to try and support that. And that's
yeah,
what
and
they would in the 70s. These bands would have told those guys to go fuck themselves, quite frankly. But I mean, let's not underestimate though that a lot of these guys just wanted to play music and they wanted to get laid and take a lot of drugs and drink, and they enjoyed the
most of them certainly
hedonistic lifestyle.
accomplished that.
Yeah, they weren't in it for a crusade, per se.
And
I
Soul
think
Assassin's right here. We are.
yeah, we are all horrible people, but we're also all good people. That's the duality of humanity. It's warring within us. I mean, I'm a great person. I don't know about you guys, but Imperatus is an interesting case because he seems like a great guy, but undoubtedly he's off skinning a goat in front of a pentagram somewhere right now.
No, not really. Not today. It's snowing out, and don't want to do it in the house. Makes a mess,
That's true. Yeah,
This
there's
is
only
true,
so many
yeah.
Well,
goats to go around.
that's
really.
the funny thing. Now that you mentioned something like that, 70s, is because like people hear me talk about like what I'm into as far as like say music, for example, and people are like, "What the fuck is wrong with this dude?"
There's nothing.
And then
wrong.
they meet me and they're like, "Wait, you listen to that?"
I think it's the smoking jacket, monocle, and cigarette holder that really puts.
Oh
them-
yeah, that definitely throws people for a loop.
That's one thing I've always loved about the metal community is, like, for the music that we listen to, everyone assumes like we're like, these heavy metal or like these musical Klingons Just show up in button-studded leather everywhere and just start drinking, which is also true.
It's also true. That part is true, but I've never
Yeah.
seen that as well. I've always, I remember growing up as a kid and getting into metal, and I had my denim jacket and all the patches on it, and hanging out with all those guys at gigs that were into the same shit. They were the mildest bunch of nice, ordinary guys that you could meet. There was none of this satanic panic. Oh my God, you guys are horrible, whatever.
Well, my scene definitely didn't do metal any favors by doing the shit that they did.
Yeah, but it's just
murders, art, church burning.
Yeah, the black metal scene kind of took it a bit far.
But
yeah.
I've hung out with some people from some I've hung out with the guys from Cannibal Corpse. You listen to their, read their song lyrics. You're like, these are some fucked up individuals. No.
Oh yeah.
No.
George is like the nicest guy ever.
Yeah, the singer George is one of the nicest guys ever. Yeah. I was talking to the bassist, Alex Webster. He's like, I'll be right with you in a second, dude. I got to go talk to my daughter on the tour bus real quick.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to strip artistic expression away from, people's personal proclivities. I mean, it doesn't mean because you're screeching and shouting in some loud metal thing that you're somehow a deviant, whatever. It's just not like that. Well, that's what they said about Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and The Who and okay, they all did crazy things, that some of which they shouldn't have done, or I wouldn't have done if I was them. But it doesn't mean they were all like, well, Jimmy Page maybe was a bit weird, but it doesn't mean that you are what you sing about.
Right.
Occasionally, it can be.
And like during the Satanic Panic, they were out there like, oh, these guys are out there burning down churches and stuff like that. And we're like, no, we don't. And then the black metal guys actually did it. And we're like, okay, nobody but them is doing that.
That's right.
But that also happened long after the Satanic Panic, though.
Yeah, that was more like late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Just because Judas Priest sing about breaking the law doesn't mean they're out there all night shoplifting and smashing windows, It
also doesn't mean they're not doing that, but,
doesn't mean they're not doing it, true. I mean, these are pretty much ordinary guys that they all had decent family upbringings, most of them.
Yeah, most of them are pretty normal people.
Yeah.
Like I think Glenn Tipton and Tony Iommi both worked at British Steel together.
Yeah, hear Tony Iommi speak. He's a well-mannered, well-brought up, good public. At the time, Britain had a good public school education system. Good to open to anybody. He's well-spoken, mild-mannered. It's.
And like Soul Assassin's got it nailed down. You got Lemmy, who would just speak to everybody and basically just be the coolest guy ever. And then you have Varg.
Yeah. Varg's a special breed.
Even for the black metal guys, Varg's out there.
In every form of artistic expression, there are going to be a handful of people that are beyond the pale.
Yeah, and for black metal, Varg Vikernes is that person.
Yeah,
there were classical composers that were seen as the wild men of rock at their time, like Mozart, and they were the, oh my God, he's terrible.
Varg isn't a wild man; he's just an asshole.
Yeah, pretty much.
But he's one guy.
Yeah, but that one guy has done significant damage to people's perception of black metal.
Oh God, yeah. And like, especially like nowadays, like when you get a singer for a black metal band, it's just like, okay, so what's the rules? Like, don't be that guy.
Yeah, don't be Varg.
Yeah.
It's like, you see him over there, don't be him.
You could sing about him though, but don't be him.
Oh yeah, you can talk about what a dick he is.
Yeah, but don't be him. Yeah. But you've had that in every genre of music, as I say, not even just in the rock.
Honestly, I really think Varg takes the cake. He, you're fairly familiar with World War II 70s. You know who Kissling was?
Oh yeah, Quisling.
He started being proud of the fact that he was related to him.
Yeah, he was the guy that sold out to the Nazis in Norway and ran the government for the Nazis.
Yeah, Varg, like I said, Varg's a very special breed.
Oh yeah,
but he's still just one guy, and not everybody. It's this thing that everyone should be painted with the same brush.
But the problem is some of the stuff that he did is what got the black metal scene's notoriety. He was behind some of the church burnings. He was behind the one big murder case. Like he's the one who actually went to jail for that. And most people, when they think of or hear about black metal, the shenanigans, usually the first example brought up is Varg Vikernes.
He's not in the room with you right now, is he?
Thank God, no.
And
I already have an interesting reputation. Being seen with him would not be.
And in
But
fairness,
yeah,
you're completely right. Like where he did so much damage to, the genre as a whole, like in terms of their public image.
And it doesn't help that he's influential within it musically.
Yeah.
His band Burzum is one of those bands when people mention black metal is like the first band, one of the first bands to get brought up from the old days.
And every time somebody brings up Burzum or Varg, I just kind of cringe internally. It's like, oh God, here we go.
And I like the music, as you know.
I'm not a Burzum fan, but like I can see why people like it.
My mother's a big fan of them. No, I'm just kidding. Luckily for her, she's deaf. She wouldn't be able to hear any of it. But,
well, yeah, Burzum's pretty much Bathory with harsher vocals.
Yeah. Which is why, like, if I'm going to listen to something like that, I'll just go listen to Bathory.
Yeah, well, Imperatus, we rely upon you to spread the good word about black metal.
Yeah. Okay.
You're the mild mannered face of it.
Wouldn't be the first time.
But no, I mean, like, these kind of scenes, like, Pink Floyd was considered kind of out there at their own time. So, like, God knows what's going to look like 20 years from now.
Various times
goes on if that continues.
At various times they have been. I mean, back in the Sid Barrett era, they were hugely. They were the biggest part of the psychedelic scene in London, and of course, you were talking about 15-hour psychedelic freakout jams with shitloads of drugs going down. So,
yeah,
they weren't. That was frowned upon by the establishment at the time.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah.
And then, other bands got away with it because, like, you'd have famous stories of Led Zeppelin, like, doing coke and getting blowjobs in the bar.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the story of my life. Not. Yeah, I mean, rock and roll was never meant to be entirely political. There's been elements of it. Most of the time, it's just a bunch of young guys partying it up and playing loud riffs.
And just having a good old time doing it. Like, that's mostly what rock has been about from minute one, is just kind of breaking out of the normal stereotype, the normal mold, and just kind of doing your own thing.
Yeah, and Pink Floyd were always on the more intellectual end of it, given their art school and university proclivities. Very opposite end of the spectrum, perhaps, from a Black Sabbath, who were all working class, blue collar guys.
Curtis, I know you said you got to go here pretty soon.
I can hang a bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah, that goat isn't going to skin itself,
It's not the skinning that's the problem. It's keeping it quiet in the meantime.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, later.
Well, it was funny. I saw somebody post something about something happening at a show and like some fan getting hurt because of some accident of some prop on stage. I was like, yeah, it still doesn't beat going to a black metal show and getting struck in the face by an animal head or skull and walking out with your nose broken and being proud of it.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
It happened.
Yeah. I think I'd rather just have a beer and listen to the
music. That's part of one of the reasons why if I go to a show this day and age, I'm well away from the damn stage.
Yeah. I like to. I go upstairs and sit down if there's a seated area. I like to be able to see. I'm short. I always hated standing only gigs. I couldn't see anything.
That's why I've always gone to general admission, because I'm a taller guy, so I just get right down in front.
I know, you're the kind of bastard I hated my whole life. Because they would always stand right in front of me. Yeah, that's why I always took a syringe full of smallpox with me and just poked them.
It's fine. I've been vaccinated against it, so we're good.
Yeah, it's funny though when you get to the point where instead of me fighting to get to the front of the stage, I'd say, "Is there a balcony in this place?"
You'd love this new arena. You'd love this new arena that just popped up in Boston under Fenway. It's got like two balconies up above the main floor. It's not a very big venue, but they've got probably like 2,500 to 3,000 seats in there.
Yeah, I'll get down there at some point, mate. Yeah, I'll be down there.
Of course, I'll have to come back up for it now.
Oh, that's true. You're in the Virginia now,
Yeah, I'm about 2 hours west of DC, so
not far enough away,
no,
quite
not quite.
frankly.
But I can still go see the Bruins play the Capitals and usually win.
Yeah. Bruins are playing today, I
Yep.
think,
I think the
against the
game might already
Blue.
be on, but whatever.
Hang on.
And now we've drifted into hockey.
We have. You see how I did that? You see what I did there?
Yeah.
I had a good show last night, good hockey show
Yeah, you
last
guys were
night.
good. That was
It
good.
was good fun, yeah. Uh,
Unfortunately for Brahma Bowl, my Bruins beat his Avalanche again.
they did. Bruins play Vegas, in Vegas, 6 p.m. Mountain Time.
They actually beat us the other night.
Why does Vegas have a hockey team? They don't even know what ice is outside of a drink.
That's right.
That's very true.
I'll give you one good reason: money.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of money because it's.
Well, that's like I heard they wanted to give one to New Orleans. I'm like, wait, what?
Nah,
They really don't know what ice is down there.
no, that would be a mistake. Houston maybe in Texas. Houston might get one, but then there's a
why
move
not
to
bring-
get one in.
Why not bring
Quebec.
back some of the older teams like the Quebec City Nordiques or the
Well,
Hartford
the
Whalers?
Nordiques is another possibility, or they would probably. I don't know if they'd be able to call them the Nordiques, but another.
Yeah, the Abs own the name. So
Yeah, I think they should bring back the old ones. Let's have the Montreal Maroons again and the Maple Leafs, not the Maple Leafs, whatever the other Toronto team used to be called. That's what they
yeah,
need.
there used to be two.
The
Yeah,
Toronto,
I don't remember
whatever.
their name off the top of my head.
Bring the
Or-
old one. Bring the old teams
Be
back.
careful what you wish for with that 70s. They might bring the North Stars back to Minnesota.
Good. They can compete with the Mild for a limited market.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, and then both teams can destroy themselves.
Although I did dislike the Stars for one thing they did when they played the Wild. They came out wearing their old North Stars jerseys. It's like, dude, don't do that. That's their crowd now.
Well, I know, and I used to go to the Stars games, and people would wear North Stars jerseys, and I'd say, well,
Yeah, technically it's the same team, but
same franchise, but can we just move on? Stop trying to
yeah,
pretend
it's like people showing up to Hurricanes games wearing Whalers jerseys. It's like, yeah, okay.
yeah. Stop trying to pretend there's an affinity between the two teams, two existing teams of today.
Yeah.
Like that. Because everybody hates the Wild, so why would we want to be?
I actually
associated
like the
with them?
Wild a lot, mainly because their goal horn's Joe Satriani. But
Oh well, see, we've got Pantera in Dallas.
it's true.
Puck
It's
off,
true.
written specially for the Stars. It's a great tune. So, the Wall movie, which you've got the poster up of. Did you guys go and see that? Were you a bit too young to see it at the cinema?
This came out in when?
Oh, like
This
1980,
was
1980, 81?
1982.
Yeah, no, I was way too young. I was like 4 in 1980 and 5 in 81.
Yeah.
So I didn't see this until I was in high school.
Yeah, what VHS or
Yeah.
or DVD?
Yeah, it was VHS.
Yeah. No, I did see it in the cinema at the time and enjoyed it. It's I've seen it a couple of times since. I mean, I think I prefer the album. Weirdly enough, I just prefer
I'm
listening
in
to the
boat
album.
because I saw, even though I saw it at like an impressionable age, I would have, it's like, oh, hey, this is really wild and really out there. This is, this is really cool. I found it to be kind of boring. Whereas the album kept me interested through when I got it, anyways, both CDs.
Yeah, I just prefer putting my own pictures in my head when I'm listening to it and using the artwork that was designed for the album to do that. But it's an okay movie, and I think I do applaud the decision not to have dialogue and just make the music speak for itself. But yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, I saw this in high school, I think, on DVD. And like you say, I liked that they didn't include any dialogue in it, and they just let the music do the talking. Because I don't think this would have worked any other way.
Yeah, I mean, I if anything, I think the stage shows were more effective.
Yeah,
Just because of the building of that damn wall on stage, which was an incredible thing to do, and then poking little holes out of it so you could see people, and then bringing it down at the end. I think that was pretty effective.
yeah. I couldn't find any pictures of the stage show, unfortunately, that I can show you. But the stage show itself was just nuts.
Yeah, I wish as I say, I bitterly regret now not going when some of my friends did. However, such is life.
Yeah, I mean, I had friends in high school who did it in the '90s get to see Pink Floyd, but it was for Pulse.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they still got to see Pink Floyd live. And as my buddy put it, they played a lot of old shit.
They did. They did a great one of these days on that tour. As I say, with the Doctor Who theme worked into the middle. But I think that was a pretty effective performance in that. I've got the DVD or Blu-ray of that gig, but no, I never saw them live. Never seen Pink Floyd live.
They were already pretty much done by the time I was really old enough to go to shows. So
Yeah, my prime gig going eras, the earlier prime gig going eras of the late 70s, early 80s. As I say, I missed the chance to see them at Earl's Court, and then after that they split up. So it wasn't until a few years later that the Dave Gilmour led incarnation went on, and then I just wasn't in a position to see them physically or financially. So it's one of these things that I missed the boat on completely. So
yeah, unfortunately, I'm in the same boat with Motorhead, where I just never got to see them live. Hey, we have sex bots. We made it, guys.
sex bot, I'm a sex bot. I did see Motorhead once, and it was on the Ace of Spades tour, so I can't complain.
Oh man, I would love to have seen them live at Foxborough. That was the old Foxborough Stadium too, if I'm not mistaken. Or,
So
or
Papa
Greatwoods,
Cotton,
that would have been a great one too.
Papa Cotton's experience. You should write a book about that experience, Papa Cotton, or at least do something with that memory. An article for a magazine, because I'd love to hear more.
That sounds like a hell of a way to experience the movie for the first
It
time.
does. It does. Yeah. The thing is, have you ever watched it again since Papa Cotton, or has it put you off watching it? It might trigger the acid flashbacks.
And it's like for me, it's not like the greatest movie of all time, but it's an interesting one and an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I mean it's in the canon of rock movies. It is pretty good. I mean, there's been some terrible ones.
Yeah, it's up there.
This is one of the good ones. I mean, it's a bit of a downer though. I mean, as the album is, of course, if you look at it in a certain way, the movie's even more of a downer. I mean, it's just for some people, I can see why they would think it was unwatchable. I mean, all the mental illness, the fascistic imagery, the fact
Yeah,
that
it
the
is not
guys,
a comfortable movie.
it's not a comfortable movie. It's powerful in many ways, but it's very and it's a real onslaught.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it's
there's
like
no
they go into some
comfort.
pretty dark topics there too.
Yeah, there's no comfort in this movie. It's like, yeah, I'm not having a good time, and by God, I'm going to show you.
And I think they accomplished that pretty well
Yeah, and I'm
of
not.
putting you in the mind of somebody in that
Yeah,
situation.
and I think Waters himself has he's not disavowed it. He has said, yeah, it was maybe a bit much.
Yeah,
In
and I can see
hindsight.
that. I can see that it being too much for some people.
Yeah, and Gilmore himself thinks that the concerts and the album were the better way to tell the story, because the movie really was. It was not a feel good movie. The feel
No,
good
it was
hit of the
not.
year. It's
Which contrasts pretty sharply from a lot of early 80s stuff where a lot of it was pretty, hot and upbeat, kind of motivational or aspirational. And then you have this.
yeah. So it's worth. I would certainly recommend people should watch it because
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. It's an
yeah,
experience.
Bob Geldof's performance was pretty good. I mean, he's not a great actor by any stretch, and I think he wanted to launch a career as an actor following that, but didn't really happen. But he does he does a good job.
And it's got to be pretty interesting to be an actor and not have any lines and yet be the main character of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how do you? I mean, you still got a script to work from. There are no lines,
Well, yeah.
but I guess there's certainly lots of direction. But I see, as you were saying, a lot of the songs were remixed, re-recorded. There's brass sections added, more orchestral stuff. I guess that would have been re-released in some kind of soundtrack format because I certainly don't recall seeing it, but I don't recall ever seeing a soundtrack album with those recordings on them.
I don't think so. I think this was basically designed to be a standalone thing.
Yeah.
And if you wanted the soundtrack, you went and bought the wall.
Yeah, I mean, you could. That's right. Yeah, you could rip it and isolate the songs if you wanted, but yeah, I don't think I've ever recalled seeing a soundtrack album released. So yeah, I guess that material is you got to figure out yourself how to get it if you want to listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, it probably exists in some format somewhere, even if it's just internet or a YouTube video where somebody cut the audio out of it.
Yeah, I
But
sometimes do that if I don't really feel like. Yeah, if there's a certain piece of music I want and it's easily available as part of a YouTube video, I just download the YouTube video and strip the audio out of it and use it. And that works particularly well for certain soundtrack things, I find.
yeah,
Yeah. Stuff that isn't available to be purchased, of course, because I wouldn't dream of doing
of course,
the
we
wrong
would
thing.
never pirate anything on this show.
Never
Oh,
would
no.
I. Don't do it, kids.
Unless it's got the Disney logo on it, then go for it.
Well, I did enjoy the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, even though I don't have Disney Plus, but
You know,
still very enjoyable.
what are you going to do, right?
What are you going to do? Yeah, Disney doesn't need my money. They've told me they don't want my money.
Exactly. We're just doing what they said. Like, they don't want our money and don't want our patronage.
They
So
don't want me watching their stuff. So, yeah, but no, well, it's worth watching. But the album itself is a magnificent achievement. It's hard to believe it's the second biggest selling album of all time.
I think it still is. I know it was for a lot of years, but
I mean, bigger than the Sound of Music soundtrack.
I don't know. But let's see here.
What is this? So it's because record sales are notoriously difficult to get really good figures on. Because either
Yeah.
A, they didn't keep them, or they're just estimates, or record companies are like film companies, very slippy when it comes to this because they want to claim things didn't make as much money. So it's hard to get an exact figure, plus with the amount of pirating that goes on around the world. I mean, who knows
Yeah,
how
these
many
days it's impossible to tell.
but even in the old days, who knew how many album copies were sold in Indonesia for an album? You know, could have been 1 million. Nobody knows. But you reckon it's the second 30 million, over 30 million copies. The best-selling double album of all time. So that's interesting. And although according to Wikipedia, Michael Jackson's Thriller is still at the top with 50 million copies sold that are
That's insane.
verifiable.
That's insane.
Yeah. Back in Black has got 30 million.
That also doesn't surprise me in a lot of ways.
But yeah, it's quite an interesting list when you look at it. The Beatles do not feature in any of the 40 million or more, but they are in the 30 to 39 million copies list. My God, Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, 25.4 million. No wonder she doesn't really need to work again.
She really only did like those 2 albums and just disappeared off the face of the earth.
I saw her playing at a festival in Scotland with Taylor Hawkins drumming. This was
Oh,
before.
wow, okay.
But the Foo Fighters were next year, were in the same festival, and he was drumming with them by then. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, I might have to, unfortunately, my friend, I may have to slip out now. So
Yeah, I think it's about about time to wrap this up anyway.
yeah, that was good though.
But for that matter, 70s, what do you got going on this week?
Oh, I don't do anything. No, just kidding. Well, tomorrow, I hope both you gentlemen are going to be available
Yeah, I'll be around.
for my It's Only Talk and Roll at 2 p.m. Mountain Time will be about the Canadian cult classic Strange Brew.
Yeah, I gotta watch that tonight.
Bob and Doug McKenzie, or Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas, as they're otherwise known. We grew out of the SCTV sketches and then the album, and then they made the movie. So we'll be talking a big bit about SCTV as well in general, but also taking a look at that movie, which is a surreal experience when you watch it. It's not quite the straightforward, funny comedy that it purports to be. There's some really surreal shit in there, like science fiction-y weird shit. So, but it's great. And then on Wednesday night, I'll be doing a one-off special with Christian Delorme and Joe's Atmosphere on Rod Stewart. Tribute to Rod Stewart. Rod the Mod. But I have specified the rules to the guys that we're not talking about anything after 1976 because he was shit after then. So, so we're only talking Jeff Beck Group, Rod Stewart and the Faces, and his early solo material. So no, do you think I'm sexy? Unless we do the Piper Dune section. So, and anyone else that wishes to join on that stream can do that. Will be 9 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday night. Christian and Joe expressed an interest in having that, and I thought I'd keep it apart. I wouldn't sully the It's Only Talking Rolls on Monday with that topic. So, but coming up soon, there will be the next It's Only Talking Roll. I'm sure you guys will be into that. Is the Dio era Black Sabbath special. So
Yes.
it's going to be that. And then Imperatus and I have been discussing the Christmas, day after Christmas, the 26th, which is a Monday, potentially doing that as a Canon Movies special. So all those great movies that Canon made, the studio made. So that's what's coming up, as well as the usual Bourbon and Boarding on Saturday nights, Midnight's Edge After Dark, blah, blah, blah.
Excellent. And speaking of Imperatus, what do you got going on this week, man?
Not much. Probably gonna do a game stream at some point this week. Just not sure what day. I have a video that I've got the audio recorded for. I got to do some editing. That's going to be my review of Sargeist's Let the Devil In. Other than that, not really much.
Cool. Excellent.
What, like let the devil in the front door or where?
They don't specify, so
I think he likes the back door best.
He does.
We have to ask Gary about that, though.
That's right. Yeah, well, he has trademarked that backdoor entry.
True, yeah.
So, yeah.
And as for me, well, next week we are going to be covering on top, same time, same channel. We are going to be covering Racer X, absolutely kick-ass speed metal band from the Southwest that never really went anywhere, but has some pretty interesting members that went on to do great things with other bands. So hope you guys will join me for that. I might try to test out Twitch sometime this week, see if it works in the new setup. And maybe I'll stream some Dark Tide or maybe some Battletech over there. And maybe you guys will join me for that. But other than that, that's pretty much all I got going on this week.
Cool.
Other than, obviously, I'll be on 70's show tomorrow. So be sure to catch that. It's going to be an excellent show. About a great historical Canadian event, the Battle of Elsinore.
That's right. Yeah. With Bob and Doug McKenzie up against Death himself.
Indeed.
And
Solo Assassin, we're not talking Static X, we're talking Racer X, the 80s speed metal band. Although I have no doubt we'll get to Static X at some point.
And just by the way, interestingly, I mentioned Christian Delorme and he turns up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like like you say his name three times and he appears.
Unfortunately, you showed up just in time for us to end the stream. But with that all being said, thank you guys all for showing up. Chat, you guys have been amazing as always, especially Pinochet's helicopter tour. All you guys have been absolutely outstanding. Always love having you. Imperative 70s, thank you for coming on as always.
My
always
pleasure.
great having you. And to the rest of you, take care, stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.
Peace.